Good day to everyone. I will present a paradox which is embedded in another paradox, because right now we are celebrating the feast, a very important holiday, and we should be resting because it is a feast day. Even though we have to rest, we are still discussing very interesting and important theological, philosophical, and technological challenges. And one of these challenges is how can we accommodate what is required of us as involved in this process of transformation from the point of view of transhumanism, and what rests for us to do regarding our human, let's say, way of being in the world. So I would like to share a few thoughts about this paradox of transhumanism, this idea that we have to progress always, we need to progress endlessly, and if this is true, and if this is required as our aim as transhumanism, where do we find a place to rest? And I will start my presentation with a quote from Marquis de Condorcet, which is one of the philosophers who started from the Enlightenment, sketched this aim of progress that is, let's say, the beginning of this modern philosophy of transhumanism. In his book from 1795, Outlines of an Historical View of the Progress of the Human Mind, he describes what are the aims of this process, the process of continuous progress. And he's referring to some moral ends, intellectual ends, political ends as well. But the final end of this endeavor is what you see in the presentation, that is to increase the duration of the human life forever. And he thinks that there is no limit to this increase of human life forever, as long as the laws of physics permits us to do it. So we know that right now we are trying to extend the limits of our lives, and there are several ways in which we can do this, either by transforming ourselves into cyborgs or by genetical improvement. But what is very true is that all our efforts to increase the duration of life presuppose a vast amount of energy and a vast amount of work. So this brings us to the problem that I want to discuss. And my thoughts about this concern this continuous movement, the acceleration of all our abilities, both intellectual and physical, that transhumanism requires. And if this is true, where is the place for rest and contemplation? because rest and contemplation is an essential part of us being humans. But if there is no end to this process of evolution, and this is a process of evolution that is a material process of evolution, then there can be any rest. This process has to be continuous. And because it has to be continuous, it requires vast amounts of energy. We have to constantly battle the entropy of the universe. Thus, if this is true, if this is the path that we are taking, then the place of rest is only temporary. We can only stop to, as they say, to recharge our batteries. Because the aim is continuous movement. One of these very interesting consequences of this continuous movement is that if we stop, for any reason, if we stop, then we will lose momentum. And if we lose momentum, then we will decay. And we can see this especially with this technological advancement and with our increasing dependence on information. We developed, even right now, different, let's say, pathologies like the fear of missing out important things, which leads to some sort of an addiction to new information, to new technologies, to new things. But what is interesting from this perspective is that this is very similar in a certain sense. This idea that you cannot stop, that if you stop, you fall. It is similar to the experience that the fathers of the church have with ascesis, with their spiritual work. And they say that you should be careful that if you stop, you might fall. So maybe there is some sort of a process of secularization of this idea of infinite progress towards God. Secularization in the sense that we are reverting to infinite progress, but in a material sense, which is very difficult to attain because it requires to discover infinity in a finite world. There is some possibilities for us to gain an experience from, to gain an insight from the experience of the hesychast movement. There is a very interesting idea about the role of the Sabbath, the role of rest in this process of attaining knowledge and progressing towards God. Because the final aim of this infinite progress is to be one with God, to rest in God. So in a certain sense, the aim of this infinite progress from a spiritual point of view would be, and we can see it from the experience of knowing God in the scriptures and the tradition of the church. And this experience is embedded in Philokalia, that is centered on the experience of God. We can see that the end of this process as mentioned by Saint Gregory Palamas, is the spiritual Sabbath. Now, what is interesting? What is this spiritual Sabbath and why it is important from the knowledge of God? So in a certain sense, from this perspective, we need rest. We need, in order to finally achieve our aim, we need to enter, and this is commanded by God, in this state of spiritual Sabbath. And just very, very briefly, because I only have 1 minute, Saint Isaiah the Solitary is talking about how you can achieve this aim of rest. He says that if you hate all the activity of this world, if you don't hate it, you cannot worship God. Your intellect, if you have activity, is always shrouded in darkness and cannot advance in holiness, because it does not make the effort to uproot these thoughts by means of spiritual knowledge. And if you free your intellect from all its enemies, and you shall attain the Sabbath rest. So, in conclusion, I think that what we need to be aware of is that we need to find a place for rest and contemplation. Otherwise, this infinite progress towards something that will mean the reverse of the Turing test, that means we will not be able to stop no matter what, will devoid us of any humanity and will leave us, instead of richer, poorer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.